Dear viewers, diabetes is one of the commonest diseases which is quite seen in almost every family. At least one in the family is affected with diabetes. And basically, this happens to be a lifestyle disorder, though the genetic reasons as a hereditary disease happens to be one of the predisposing factors, but still predominantly, in spite of this genetic predisposition, this disease makes its appearance only because of the lifestyle, the different factors relating to the lifestyle, like lack of physical activity, and then a lot of mental stress, and then irregular dietary habit, and improper diet, untimely. All these things play key role, and then they all predispose for the appearance of this diabetes. And actually, there are two types of diabetic cases. One is type 1, which is altogether a different entity. It is type 1 is because of complete lack of insulin production, and the cells which are producing insulin, we call beta cells, which are there in the pancreas, they are completely damaged following some viral infection, and this kind of diabetes can occur even in young children. That's altogether a different entity. But what we see in the middle age or elderly age is type 2 diabetes. So here, the insulin production is not actually the underlying cause, but whatever insulin that is being produced in the body, the action of the insulin is defective. So these insulins to produce the function of the insulin is to when you have your diet following the digestion and absorption, naturally there is a rise in the level of glucose in the blood, and normally the glucose that is being absorbed into the blood after the digestion, it should reach different cells of the body, and these cells take up this glucose, and then this glucose is burnt for production of energy, which we all need continuously. So for this energy production, this glucose is being picked up by the cells and used for the production of energy. So the defect is following the digestion of the food, after being absorbed as glucose in the blood, the glucose that remains in the blood is not able to gain entry into the cells. So this uptake of glucose by the cells, the entry of the glucose into the cells, and then thereafter the utilization of this glucose for production of energy, these processes are facilitated by insulin. So this particular action of insulin is defective in case of type 2 diabetes. So for this to occur, this defect in the action of insulin, otherwise we medically we call it as insulin resistance, and largely this is because of the lifestyle factors that I already mentioned. Like one is sedentary life, lack of physical activity, and a lot of mental stress, and then improper dietary composition. All these things play a role. Lack of sleep deprivation, and all these things put together, they all can result in defective action of insulin. And of late, here and there, we keep hearing what we call reversal of diabetes. This is a concept which is heard of late recently in many of the places here and there in many sources, even across the social media. We have come across this reversal or remission of diabetes. So let us look into the facts of this reversal or remission of this diabetes. So here basically, as I said, the different factors relating to the lifestyle are disturbing the action of insulin. Like I told, this sedentary life and lack of physical activity and mental stress, and this lack of physical activity contributing for putting on the weight, leading to overweight and obesity, and lack of proper sleep, this mental stress. And mental stress, lack of sleep can result in more production of stress hormone, what we call cortisol, which has got the tendency to raise the blood glucose levels. And lack of physical activity resulting in putting on more weight results in what we call the insulin resistance. So when an individual is putting on weight more than what he is expected for his height, then the insulin resistance, it becomes directly proportionate to the whatever the excess of weight an individual has put on. So in other words, we can say when there is a shedding of the weight, and in an attempt in bringing down, in shedding the weight, when in doing so, when the weight is close to the desired weight for the height given of the individual, then it is nothing but will be dealing with the insulin resistance. So more the weight is lost, whatever that excess of weight that is there, which is being lost in weight losing activities, be it by improving the physical activity or by cutting down on the carbohydrate intake in the diet that we take by whatever means. So through dietary restriction as well as by improving the physical activity, when the weight is shed and the desired weight is achieved for the given height, then this by itself will take care of insulin resistance. So when the more of the fat is getting deposited in the body, particularly around the abdominal fat, we call it as a visceral fat, otherwise medically we call it as a central obesity. And so higher this fat, more will be the insulin resistance. So synonymously we can say when this fat is shed, the insulin resistance will be coming down. And similarly, when it comes to even the carbohydrate intake, the dietary habit, we need to put a check on consumption of the carbohydrate. And another factor is the more of this fat deposits below the skin, that itself resulting in obesity by itself is the reason for insulin resistance. And the carbohydrate by itself, to the extent we need for our calorie needs, energy needs, we need to consume the carbohydrate. But any carbohydrate that is being consumed beyond what we need, it is being converted into fat, which many are not aware actually. When one is putting on excess weight, it is not actually the fats that we need to cut down, but actually any excess of the carbohydrate that we are consuming beyond what we need is turning into fat and getting deposited. So in our attempt to control the diabetes, the primary target is to bring down the insulin resistance. So this is achieved by shedding the weight, which is possible by increasing the physical activity, then by focusing on the dietary intake, where primarily the carbohydrate content must be cut down to the large extent. So the fats and fats and proteins one can have liberally, and even when it comes to carbohydrates, it's better to include those kind of stuff which are rich in fiber content, and many of the vegetables and unpolished rice and many of the fruits, and of course that fruits which are too ripe and sweet need to be avoided, and fruits like guava, and if not the fruits, many of the vegetables which are rich in this fiber is to be included as a routine in the diet. And even when it comes to the mental stress, the lack of sleep, the sleep deprivation and mental stress, it results in production of a stress hormone, what you call cortisol, and this cortisol has got the tendency to raise the blood glucose levels. So when we focus on all these aspects which will result in causing this high glucose and causing this insulin resistance, when we attend to all these risk factors, like we have enlisted the excess of weight, the sedentary life, then mental stress, then dietary habit and sleep deprivation, when you attend to all these factors, you'll be able to bring down the insulin resistance, and whatever insulin that is being produced in the body, it will have more efficiency to control the blood glucose levels. So it will facilitate uptake of the glucose by these cells to burn them and then derive energy. And also the input of the glucose is also checked by means of adding more of fiber to your diet and adding more of vegetables and cutting down on carbohydrates in general, and of course any stress causing conditions, when you practice mental relaxation techniques by resorting to maybe particularly to be most effective, the meditation is the best thing I can suggest. But if not, at least listening to the music or attending to gardening or playing with the children and indulging in any kind of activity that can really give some kind of recreation and relaxation, which can bring down your stress, which brings down your cortisol levels, also will contribute to bring down the glucose levels. So all said and done, this reversal of the diabetes, though it never means that once the glucose levels are brought to normal by doing all this, and even when you are off the medication, it never means that it is going to be permanently reversed altogether, and it doesn't mean that you don't need your medication anymore. All that we can say, or all that we can hope for, is the diabetic state, high blood glucose levels can be brought back to normal, which can even be maintained even without medicines. But still, all the precautionary measures that we have discussed till now, that should be adhered to, and one must take care all through with regard to the physical activity, and then maintaining the ideal weight, and then managing the mental stress, and even paying attention to the proper diet, the composition, quantity and quality of the diet that you take. All these measures are to be strictly adhered to, and so long this is in practice, we can certainly hope for maintaining the blood glucose levels well within the normal limits, even without medication. And rather we call this a remission rather than reversal. So which means that when these things are not in practice, there is every possibility for the glucose to shoot up again. So when we are committed enough to adhering to these practices, we can be very much hopeful and confident about bringing back the blood glucose levels and keeping them well within the normal levels even without medication. And it is quite desirable to resort to these practices. Why? Because depending solely on medication prescribed by the doctor, and when in not controlled, rushing back to the doctor asking for the change of medication or increasing the dosage is not at all a healthy practice. So keeping this in view, because it is a lifestyle disease, the better approach to control diabetes will be always, as I said, to attend to these risk factors. And I can confidently say that these factors, when attended to, these influencing factors, when attended to, the remission of the diabetes is quite possible, and which is a natural and effective means of controlling diabetes. Thank you.